Fresh Economic Thinking podcast, new ideas and analysis with Dr. Cameron Murray and Jonathan Gadir. Hi Cameron, how are you going?
Well, Jonathan, good to be back talking again.
Yes, look, I wanted to talk again about superannuation, returning to one of your favourite topics, and I guess now my favourite topics. And I want to return to it because it's gone from something that I never thought about, didn't really want to think about, it was too boring, to maybe in the last couple of years or maybe the last 4 years, and partly thanks to your writing and your speaking, something that I actually think is not just kind of, unnecessary and a hassle, but something that I now think is quite immoral and something that would justify like mass civil disobedience in terms of like
Yeah,
withdrawing money, getting out of the system, and just saying, hey, I dare you to do whatever you do to me to
yeah. Give me my money back,
punish me.
sort of. Is that what you mean?
Um, yeah, yeah, and the more I think about it, the more sort of disturbed I am that there's all these bureaucrats employed just to punish people who access their money. And also like I listen to now onto what I would have considered a few years ago to be very boring superannuation podcasts. And I realize, there's this whole industry where they don't even mention anything about what's good about super. They just take it as the settings are like God-given, and we just discuss about how to maximize our personal advantage. Anyway, that's a long intro. Let's talk
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. Well, I find it interesting that you have changed your view because I changed my view probably 5 years before you did by looking into super, and the only conclusion I could come to when I dug into the details of the system, not your individual perspective, but as a system for providing retirement income, the only logical conclusion I could make from what I saw was that it's totally unnecessary and it's taking money from people when they need money to give back to them when they don't need money, and it's costing us tens of billions a year in fees to do it. It's maddening. So yeah, I'm also puzzled. Now that you've mentioned it, where is the anti-superannuation lobby? Why doesn't it exist? Have you ever heard of it? I haven't.
No, but I want you to call for a campaign against super to
Okay.
abolish compulsory. Yeah.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it. So everyone who's listening, please add a comment, email me, get on Fresh Economic Thinking, and tell me who would be interested in an anti-superannuation lobby, why you are or you aren't interested, because I think I've got some pretty good arguments why it's bad, and maybe some pretty interesting Game of Mates style reasons why this sort of anti-superannuation lobby isn't a thing just yet. So yeah, it'd be great to hear from the listeners on this too.
So I'd like to talk a bit about who are the constituents, who could be part of, like, who's an obvious member of a campaign to abolish compulsory super. But before we go there, like for me, the two things that I find now to be indefensible, unjustifiable, completely immoral about the system is that it takes money from people who are at a time of their life when it could create life opportunities, life experiences, enrich their lives, whether it's starting a business, whether it's owning a home, whatever it is. It takes it away, and then it, as you say, gives it back at a time when maybe you're not able-bodied anymore. Maybe you don't have the health or the
Mm,
energy to pursue those life opportunities. It's too late. The idea that it's never too late, that's to me is rubbish. Of course, it's sometimes too late.
hmm.
Um, we have finite lives.
Yeah.
Our health doesn't last forever. And so, okay, so that's number one. And number two is a certain percentage of people, I can't remember what the figures were, you can enlighten me again,
Hmm.
are just going to be dead. They're never going to use money because they're never going to reach the age when they're allowed to get it.
Yeah, it's about 1 in 7, 1 in 8 men. And, the more working class you are, the younger men die. So it's more like 1 in 6 men who have physical jobs and are pretty working class. And, here's the question. Is it fair to take the money off 1 in 6 working class men while they're alive, while they're raising families, and keep it until they're dead? And sure, maybe their spouse or their children can inherit some money, but maybe instead we should have life insurance for that, or maybe we should have widows insurance or things like that do exist. It's not clear to me that the best thing was to take their money from them while they were alive and they never saw it again. I agree that that's a big moral case against this and a big moral case for a retirement system that ensures amongst people who don't live a long time and people who do, right? And it sort of shares the load a bit. And of course, the less you earn, the less you contribute to that sort of thing. Whereas, yeah, the super system, it's 10% no matter your income, whether you got 5 kids and you need your money today. Sorry, we're taking 10%. You got no kids, a 2 income professional couple. Sorry, we're taking 10%. Okay, that's kind of, very uh, contradictory to the way we design our welfare system, right? People with more kids, they get more from others. We share the load, but that's not how super's designed. And yeah, I think you're right. There's a moral case there. I'm surprised, that who do you think would be interested in that moral case? Do you think sort of the right-wing individualistic groups, or do you think that's a left? I don't know where this falls politically, but I
Yeah,
think I'm
like
I
the
think I'm with
obvious.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the obvious one would be, yeah, any organization that purports to represent working class people, whether that's, you know, unions or other groups, but as you probably are about to say, they're conflicted now, aren't they? Because they have entered the superannuation industry as players.
Yeah. E-
Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Look, the current uh, landscape of politics is that the labor movement and I better mention my mate Rob here, who started a website called Workers Against Super some time back, and I'm not sure it still exists, but he was a very astute observer, and he noted that the Labor Party is not about workers; they're about the the worker corporate employer relationship, and they want workers to be reliant on that relationship, right? So they want retirement to go through that worker employer relationship. They don't want this separate social insurance like the welfare system that we have. They want it to be tied to the worker, and I think that's really weird, right? Because if we were in America talking about healthcare, having your health insurance tied to your employment, right? We would say that's ridiculous. Just do Medicare. Just have social insurance for healthcare. Yet, when we talk about insuring retirement, we're like, no, 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 you can't just have social insurance. You've got to tie something to your employer and you've got to be um, paying in based on your income and have a special account. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, right? If it didn't make sense in healthcare, it doesn't make sense in insurance, in retirement insurance. But the Labor Party that's the sort of position they've staked out. And you can see in the US, that's the same position the Democrats have staked out. They don't want social insurance for healthcare, really. They kind of still like this employer dependency. And it's a puzzle to me. Have you noticed that before?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's like, and I think I've said this before on one of our previous episodes on super, that it's an argument from the left of politics that you don't hear on any other topic. The argument being, oh, there's not going to be enough money for people to have a good, decent retirement income. We need this special system, but they don't say, oh, in the future, we're not going to have enough money to put every kid through school, or we're not going to have enough money to treat all the very old people who are going to be around. We need a special account, that you put into for your hospitals. It's
Mm,
just not an argument that they say. They say,
mm,
well, it's the responsibility of government to properly fund the health system. It's the responsibility of government to properly fund the school system. And I would say, well, yeah, it's the responsibility of government and for the public to demand of government that they properly fund a decent level of pension for the aged.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's not rocket science at all, is it? You know what's really funny though? The economics tells us there is only one retirement system. There is this myth out there about super being this special magic compounding fund that gives us more than what we put back into it, right? And I think what we forget is, do you know why the balances in super compound? Because the economy's growing. Do you know what
Yeah.
else compounds when the economy grows? Our ability to raise taxes from everyone and fund whatever we
Hmm.
like. So why is it that we use that argument on one side? Oh, no, no, there's this magic thing called super, and ignore it on the other side. Well, when we can compound the productive capacity of the economy and fund whatever we like in the future. I find that a real bizarre one as well, that we pick and choose special arguments, right, when it comes to super. And that really bugs me. And so many people I've met have internalized this. They're like, oh, no, no, it's the magic of compound interest. Don't you get it? It's a magic thing. I'm like, well, hang on, where does that come from? Right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
magic. It comes from somewhere. It comes from the compounding growth of the economy. Do you know what else comes from that? The ability to raise taxes and support retirement outside of super too. Yeah, it's funny, hey?
So there's obviously like my completely unscientific response is it's kind of religious in nature. There's a religious element, a psychological element. It's a righteous thing to sacrifice, and that you've said
Mm,
this before, I know. Yeah, to sacrifice now and reap the rewards later. That rather than there's something suspect and corrupt about enjoying life now
yeah.
without sacrifice. Um,
No, you're totally right on this. Humans are hardwired when we can perceive a threat. And whether that's getting older, okay, we can observe individually getting older. Oh, what if we collectively get older? Oh, okay, I can see that. Our monkey brains are wired to see that as a threat, but our monkey brains are also wired to not think of um, practical solutions. Our monkey brains are wired to think, oh, if we must do something, we must sacrifice today for the gods, right? We must, and I see this in so many places because there is actually a long tradition of saving being a virtuous thing in
yeah.
religion, right? And
Yes, yeah.
so super has this, as you say, religious element that, oh, look, our public policy aligns with this religious, uh, righteous act. How perfect. And how
Mhm.
good does that stimulate our monkey brain that, oh, look, we're sacrificing. Oh, look, that religion say that good, that's good. Oh, look, the policy settings say that's good. Therefore, it must work. But
Yes.
practically, all we're doing is giving tax breaks to the highest income people and encouraging them to retire early so they can get their super out, because you can get lump sum super only if you retire from work, which is the exact opposite of what we think we're doing. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the only one here pointing out super does all the opposite things that you want from a retirement system. The logical conclusion then for is to give people their money back and let the age pension do its thing. Like the age pension really is magic because it's a social insurance system. Like insurance it works, right? You get insurance for your car voluntarily because it's such a good thing to do, right? You pool your
Yeah.
money, you decrease risks by pooling them. It works in retirement too, right? That's where the magic is, but super doesn't get that. It gets this other story, which isn't magic, which is, oh, money goes up. It wouldn't go up otherwise. Therefore, saving is good. Something, you know, it's a puzzle to
Yeah.
me.
And I actually tried to research because I thought, well, this was introduced back by, I think, in the days of the Keating Labor government,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken. And I looked and I tried to research and look back at some of because I thought, well, the strongest argument for the super system would come from the guy who introduced it. And Paul Keating,
Yeah.
he's a big ideas guy, and you could usually find, arguments that he made in speeches and so on that I thought, okay, I'll look for those and see what the best possible argument for the system is. And I was very disappointed because what I found was kind of, I didn't really find what I was looking for in
Hmm.
his arguments. I found a kind of odd kind of vacuum of sort of neoliberal, like standard neoliberal ideas combined with just the notion that it's good for working people because otherwise, if the system didn't exist, working people would be destitute when they retired. There wasn't the intellectual meat there that I expected to hear.
Mm,
And when I went back and I looked at the justifications,
yeah.
but certainly not a progressive. There's not a progressive philosophy behind it, economically speaking.
Yeah. Can
Although it
I,
was couched in those terms. Yeah.
yeah, can I jump in? There's actually two other big arguments that were going on when super was introduced. The first one was that workers want a pay rise, but if we give workers a pay rise through these union bargains, these accords, they will spend the money and we'll get more inflation. And inflation is bad. Inflation is another sort of bogeyman, right? Everyone, just quick side note, I don't get it. Is it like a right-wing signaling game to say inflation's terrible, inflation's worse than you think? I just find that weird. But there really was a lot of inflation in the 70s. And in the 80s, when super started coming in, there was a concern that pay rises to workers would get them to spend. So the bargain was, we'll give you a pay rise, but you can't spend it right now on goods and services. We'll put it in an account for you, and that will let inflation come down. You can spend it later when there's no inflation. Okay, great. So that sort of gives away the story that super is your wages, right? There's another myth out there that super's something extra. It's not. You can always just change the rule to allow people to spend out of their super account and turn it into 100% wages anytime you want. So that was one of the concerns, inflation. The other one was the current account deficit. So the current account deficit is essentially the gap between the value of exports and imports. So if it's negative, you've imported more than you've exported, and you've sort of paid for that by selling domestic assets like property, shares, real, things like that. Aussie dollar bank accounts to foreigners. And the idea was the current account deficit's bad, but of course, globally, current accounts balance out, right? Every deficit is a surplus of some other country. And the idea here was, well, we need to save more because saving somehow decreases the current account deficit, right? We, but it's not saving that does that. It's buying foreign assets that does that. And
Mm.
that's how countries manage their exchange rates and things like that. And you know what's really interesting? We introduced super, and Paul Keating was so mad keen on the current account deficit for decades, but basically everyone else forgot about it and said, you know what? It's not that important. It's not an economically significant thing. It's true that we have a current account surplus now, but I think a lot of that is the change in the 2010s to the mining, iron ore and coal sector in particular, that have just become massive export industries that are big enough now to compensate for that foreign investment in Australia and balance those accounts a little bit more. So he created this massive, massive saving system to somehow encourage us all to buy foreign assets to solve the current account deficit, which sort of got solved in the 2010s by mining anyway. But of course, here's the thing. If other countries are saving too in their sovereign wealth funds and accounts, we can't outsave them to fix the current, because they're trying to buy Aussie assets to reduce their current account deficit. We're trying to buy their assets. It's a zero-sum game on this balance, right? As I said. So he was really onto that, and he's like, super's going to solve this. It's important for Australia. And, I went through a period of what is the current account deficit? Why isn't it weird that it's so big in Australia? And then at the end of the day, you realize, oh, it's just, sometimes we trade goods and services and sometimes we trade assets and they balance out. And so we've got this system that we now think is for retirement, when the two biggest motivations for introducing it were to stop inflation and change the current account deficit, neither of which are really a problem at all anymore. Isn't that bizarre?
It is, yeah. Yeah, all these fads that have little basis in, real effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're defending this system as, oh, it's the perfect retirement system. I'm like, how could this thing designed to stop inflation and reduce the current account deficit morph into the world's most perfect retirement system? I mean, that seems like a story you would tell if you were on the receiving end of $30 billion a year in fees for managing money that people must compulsorily give you each year out of their salary, right? So that's my sort of gamer mates story of how the myth of super evolved in Australia and why right now there's just, we don't have the anti-super lobby. I think it's me, and I think I've convinced you, and I think I've convinced my mate
Yes.
Rob, and maybe five people. But is there an
Yeah.
institutional,
Hmm.
who do you think, Jonathan,
Yeah.
would
Yeah. I mean,
stick
do you
up
think
for
small,
people?
like obviously we've said that the working class people are probably the ones who could benefit from, I guess what we're saying, what are we saying? We're saying just don't make it compulsory. If people want to save 11%, fine.
Correct.
But if they want to save 2% or nothing and just rely on the pension, then that's also fine. Is that what we're saying?
That's my opinion 100%. And in fact, I think you you don't even need the tax break settings of super. You don't need this pre-tax saving system. Just pay tax on your income, save what you want, spend what you want. It just simplify, simplify, simplify. Like the age pension is pretty good, right? For home owning households, I've written about this on Fresh Economic Thinking before. I've compared the living costs of renter families in capital cities versus home owning retirees with two people in their household who get the age pension. And honestly, if you only have two people to support on the age pension rather than five people to support on a single income and pay rent, you know, retirees are better off than a lot of working families, which is
Okay.
why so many working families get welfare. And back to your original point, right? People need the money when they have five people in their house to feed, right? And their time is stretched, right? And that's why we have payments for parents, payments for extra kids, all that stuff. And yet at the same time, the super system is completely ignorant of that and goes, sorry, you're too poor to have all your kids at home. We'll give you some money, but you're too rich. Well, I'm going to take 10% as well. Which is it?
Hmm. 11%. Yeah.
11% now. That's
Um,
right. It keeps going up.
do you think small business owner sector, like self-employed people, tradies, do you think they are a natural constituency for an anti-compulsory super campaign? I don't know. You tell me what you think.
Yeah, I don't know either because, the self-employed are really, it's tricky. I know in the trades they have, trade sort of industry super that you pay into as a self-employed person if you want. Um, for a lot of self-employed, it's voluntary anyway, so it doesn't really,
Yeah, right.
you
So that's
know,
the thing, isn't it?
doesn't
Yeah. So you've got
really
this.
change much
Yeah.
for them. It's kind of if I want to take it up, I do it. If I don't, I don't. Okay, fine. You already aren't forced to do it. So
Yeah, right.
there's no
So
incentive for you to lobby against it because if you want your money, you can keep it. Who else do you think?
mm.
Um,
People who have, I don't know, like their community dies younger than on average. I mean, that's very harsh and cold thinking, but
well, I mean, the
people who
Indigenous
have,
community
yeah,
dies younger quite clearly, right? And
yeah.
you could basically say super is racist if you wanted.
If
If
you
you
wanted to,
wanted to
yeah,
play a culture
because,
war, because it
yep.
takes money from Indigenous men who die younger and never get to see their money, right? We could
Hmm.
do that. I
Yeah.
don't think that's,
No,
um,
it's not a productive line of argument, but,
no.
it's,
But I'm
I mean, in
sort
the
of
same
surprised
way,
it
you could
hasn't
say,
bubbled up into the
yeah.
discussion.
Because of course the Queensland and other state governments, I think, did steal wages from Indigenous people and say, "Oh, we'll give it to you later."
Yeah, yeah.
Historically,
There you go. Yeah,
yeah,
it's stolen wages for sure. I mean, there's a lot of emotive lines, but where's the true economic coalition here against it? I think young families. I don't know how to get an organization or a coalition of people with lots of children who need their money when they're young.
mm, yeah. It's
Like,
just the kind of majority of the population, really. I mean, it's yeah. Well, I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know. Yeah.
But then again, we're a rich country, and a lot of families don't. really need their money, right? Oh, do I have an extra overseas holiday or I get tax break and, you know, do a luxury cruise and I'm 60? It's kind of like not a big deal, the difference, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe it's people who want the money now to send their kids to private school, right? That's an expense that you got to pay at the time. I
I wonder
don't
if any,
know.
I wonder if anything can be done on the accounting profession side because I've just heard these sort of like on these podcasts, super podcasts I've been listening to, these sort of smaller sides that make me think, oh, geez, these guys are really brainwashed. They've totally switched off their brains. Like it's little comments, asides like, oh, we think there might be an issue with, what the reasons behind early access, illegal early access to super. Um, this is for people with self-managed
Hmm.
funds. The idea out there that it's their money, and I just thought, what do you mean the idea that's out there? That's
Yeah.
obviously think that it's not correct, like that it's not their money.
Yeah,
So
it's our
the
play
accounting
money.
profession, the accounting profession has adopted, or at least certain elements of it seems to have adopted the idea that these naughty people,
They-
they're taking money that's not really theirs. They think it's theirs.
That's
Well,
funny.
I thought there's an argument to be made that it's like the employer, like you could say, oh, the employer's giving it instead of giving you a pay rise. They're not giving you a pay rise and they're putting money into the super as they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
Coming
a
from
good
the
one.
employer.
Look, in terms of the yeah, I don't know about accountants, honestly, but one coalition that seems to form is using super for housing. So potential first home buyers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there seems to be, in terms of me talking to people, um, I know a lot of people who'd be like, I'd love to use my super to buy a house. People who are quite pro
hmm
super can see the logic of getting their money now for that reason. So I think
hmm
maybe the Liberal Party um, has found a bit of a coalition there, but I don't think they're anywhere near taking the logic to its conclusion of let's get rid of super altogether. I think they still want tax breaks for voluntary savings, which will be even more skewed up the income distribution. But there seems to be a bit of a coalition there of potential first home buyers at the moment. I don't know how long that will last because the property goes in cycles, right? So that could change
Right.
as
Right.
well. Are there any others though?
Um,
I'd really love to hear from listeners because this is
I
literally a
think I think
call
we
out
need
as
to,
well.
yeah, we need to get the ideas flowing for the campaign against compulsory super. And yeah, I think I think this is the best way of doing it. Just ask people what they think, and you get comments on your Substack. We'll be really
Yeah,
interested to know.
yeah. So currently it's just the Fresh Economic Thinking campaign, but let's just see who we can bring in and who can follow the logic through there to its conclusion.
Yeah. So would you call on people to visit your Fresh Economic Thinking Substack and
Add a comment to this podcast on the Substack, and you can also reply to the email that you get with this podcast and get in touch with me that way.
brilliant. All right. Look forward to chatting more next time. Thanks, Cameron.
Great to chat, Jonathan.